This time on Captain Castle's Laboratory, we're going to be working on a rare piece, only because I've never worked on one before. This is the Avon. Y'all remember Avon. Patriotic Fiber Optic Lit House is what it's called. And I have it because it doesn't change colors. So that means the pinwheel has died. So if you look in there, it's dark without it, but it's not turning. So that means all of these lights aren't changing color. This tree won't change color because the pinwheel's not turning. So I'm assuming it's got a bad motor. So we're going to open it up, take a look. And the only thing I didn't pull out of the box is the flag that goes on the flag post here. So that's still in the box, just something to get broken. If you don't have this piece, or you do have this piece and you lost the AC adapter, it's actually printed right there. I don't know if the lights are going to pick it up. There we go. Input 12 volt AC. Center, doesn't matter. A lot of them have that circle with the dot. It doesn't because it's very AC, so it doesn't really care which side's which. Alright, so taking a look at this thing, I got screws on the bottom, I got screws in the back, I got screws everywhere. So the first thing I'm going to do is, on the bottom, is the access for the light bulb. I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to see if we have access to the pinwheel too. We're supposed to be able to pull this out, and man, that wire's tight. It's probably never been opened. There we go. There's the light. It is a 12 volt, 5 watt light. They do make, this is incandescent, and they do make it in LED. So, if you want to reduce your heat, that's what these holes are for. They're not for a speaker. They're for venting the heat of this bulb as it gets hot. Which is why if your pinwheel fails, you don't want to keep the light on for too long, because if that's a plastic pinwheel, it'll melt. If it's a glass pinwheel, you might bubble the paint off, but it won't melt the pinwheel. Now that I have it open, where I can see inside, plug her back in. If I can get blinded by the light, camera, I'm going to turn it sideways. And that motor is humming, but the shaft is not spinning, which indicates to me the motor has failed. And I'm going to show you the bottom. I'll try, and I get a good grip on it. There we go. So there's the motor, and down there's the pinwheel. I'm trying to see, you can see the colors in the light. So what didn't take the bottom off? We're going to start with the bottom and not the back. Oh, this is all plastic. This is a plastic house, so it's not as fragile as the ceramic houses or the resin houses, but nonetheless, you don't want to drop it, you'll shatter it, but it is a plastic house. There's a lot of screws to hold this bottom on. This is probably too big to fit in the hole. Yeah. Something with a little more oomph. These screws were apparently put in with, at the time, a Loctite agent. If you see on this one here, you'll see this white powdery stuff. That's to prevent the screws from backing out. So I'm just going to use the power drill. there are a lot of screws. Okay. This one doesn't want to come out at all. So we'll have to do it the old-fashioned way. 3, 6, 8, 10 screws plus the light access screw. That's what you have to take out. Now, 2 fiber optic bundles right here go into these 2 holes right here. Those are the ones for the main house. So, the fiber optics is encased in a cage. Or sorry, the pinwheel motor assembly is encased in a cage for the fiber optics. And then this cup, that's also, this whole piece right here is screwed in. This cup is for the tree. Couldn't tell by the sound, but I just charged this overnight, and that's because of the stuff they put on the screws. This is a general purpose tool, not usually designed for breaking stuff free, in the sense of like a Loctite. I don't mean to unscrew a screw. No matter where I put that, it's going to be kind of in the way. So how is this pinwheel attached? Is it just pressed in? And this is a plastic disc. You see, it's all flexible. It's amazing. Move the motor. Let's see if it just tries. Yeah, the motor's humming, but no excitation. So the motor is bad. It's a 40 millimeter synchronous motor. I'm assuming it's the 12 volt AC motor, and that's why it runs on AC. You might have an issue with the length of the shaft finding the correct replacement, but we're going to find out once we get this thing out. There's the markings right there. It is a 4.5 RPM at 1.5 to 2 watt, and it's a CCW/CW 12 volt AC 50-60 Hertz. It's a TYC 50-12 synchronous motor, but this does not look like a 50 millimeter body. It might be, it's just deceiving. But how do we get this white top off? Like so. So there's a little dab of glue. I can barely see the remnants there, and it's inside that they just put that on with, and then they just push that over the shaft. So if you have this piece, just pop the white piece off. It's a solid shaft, non-keyed, so it's just a round shaft. There's no hole in the center for a screw, and it's not shaped like the letter D or a square, so it's not keyed in any fashion. Now comes the fun part, finding a motor. This is a 40 long shaft, meaning it's a 40 millimeter, not a 50. But that's why I said that looks funny, because that definitely looks like a 40. So this is a TYC 40 12 volt DC. I thought it said AC through the package. So that won't work. You never want to put a DC motor on an AC circuit, or vice versa, because you'll I see a lot of blue smoke. What do we got here? We have here a AC 12 volt, 50-60 hertz, 2 to 3 watts, 5-6 RPM. It is a threaded shaft, but it is round. It is a 40, which is why I say it's a 40, because if you look at the size, they're the same. But it is a hair shorter, so that might interfere with the light. But there's only one way to find out. Put that off to the side. We're gonna screw this motor in. And we're gonna try to, if the screw wants to cooperate. There we go. I'm gonna put the light back in, and I'm actually gonna screw it in because this, from underneath, it looked like it's screwed into that plastic cover. It doesn't. It has its own little boss that's not affected by anything. And the shaft is, so it shouldn't interfere. It looks like I'm going to have plenty of clearance, but it looks like this shaft might be a slightly larger diameter, so I can't get the disc on. So take it out real fast. Oh, yep, it is a slightly bigger diameter. Now this is kind of a hard plastic. So I have two choices. I can try and find a slightly smaller diameter, or we can make that hole slightly larger. But let me see what else I got up here. Maybe I have a smaller diameter AC motor. I think this is the exact same one. Yeah. Because this is the replacement that I use for these long shafts. They just never had pinwheels on the top, or color wheels. I used to, when I was growing up, people call them pinwheels. I think they just call them color wheels now. It's amazing how verbiage changes for the times. That's a really short shaft. That's not going to do, but that's a 50. You see the size difference? It's kind of obvious. That's why I'm wondering if this one is mismarked, or if they changed the definition. So, you know, things happen over time. Great example of change is when I was growing up, a motor referred to your engine in your car. Now, because of electric cars, the motor is the motor in an electric car, and an engine is a gas-powered car. That's a DC motor. That's a shame because that has a tapered shaft with threads. I could probably fit on that better, but that one's a DC motor. So I have a lot of DC long shafts left, but only 2 ACs. So the easiest way to do this is we need to find a drill bit that's the same diameter as that. I'm sure that's a standard 3 mil or 3.5 mil, most likely, actually. That's too small. just going to drill down a little bit. I'm going to hold this so I don't spin the disc and scratch it. If you do this in your hand, which is not recommended by OSHA, you got to do it slowly and carefully. So I barely have the drill turning, and I'm just slowly guiding it in. It's getting there. Now, if you don't want to do it the dangerous way, shouldn't recommend it. If you have some long, thin needle nose pliers, hold the white plastic. Just make sure you don't go too deep and drill through the top. The first time I stopped and cleaned off these large chips was the right stop. I just went back in to clean out the hole. And now it fits on. And I'm going to put a dab of hot glue on it. That way it's easier to come off. Also, I found that hot glue bonds better between metal and plastic than super glue does, or Gorilla Glue. So that way it's less likely to break free. Now, fortunately, hot glue is susceptible to, well, heat, hence the name. So when you live in Arizona, you have a potential of having it just dissolve on its own from storage. So we got about a 1/4 inch clearance here, and maybe just under a 1/2 inch at the inside, because this motor doesn't sit flush, it sits at an angle, and that's because the mount is at an angle, so that way the color transition is probably a little easier, less jagged in its rotation. Alright, so we're going to need solder, so we're going to have to get that thing cooking there. There's 2 ways to do this. You can cut this heat shrink right here and then solder that whole junction back together. Much fun as that is, I'm just going to trim the wires a little farther back. So, get that out of here. Now, going back to this thing being AC motor, AC doesn't care which wire you solder to which, unless it is specifically mentioned. That's generally not used too much on motors. That would be for more like polarized type items. This isn't polarized. Remember to put your heat shrink on ahead of time. Now, if you don't have heat shrink and you don't want to go waste your time buying some, you can use electrical tape, liquid electrical tape if you have it, and as most of these manufacturers do it, they just use hot glue, where you make a hot glue ball around each of your connections. Limax is really good at that. Department 56, not so much. They like to actually use some sort of coating. It's usually not electrical tape, it's this plastic type tape. I'm going to get the hot glue gun ready over here. Kind of neat to see this old Avon house. I'm sure a lot of people who were born in the 70s, maybe even the 60s, had somebody in their family at one point sell Avon. Avon calling! I'm sure most people have probably been to an Avon party or get together or open house or whatever their term was at the time. So I've never seen this. I mean, I do have an Avon piece. I have an Avon Christmas fountain that the other member of the Random Junk Channel picked up at a pawn shop or a Goodwill. I can't remember. I think it was Goodwill. And he wants me to try and fix it just to see if it can be repaired, because it has an actual real Avon fountain. And, well, scheduling and stuff just hasn't permitted for me to take the time to work on it, but I've had it for about a year. It is going to eventually get fixed, or attempted to be fixed. It may not be repairable. I haven't figured out how to get into it, because it's sealed since you actually fill it with water. It has a real functioning fountain and a whole bunch of fiber optics. I do know if I plug it in, the fiber optics light up and the pinwheel does work, or the color wheel, because it does change colors. So turn off that. And you can use a heat gun, hair dryer. I just use a lighter. If you watch most of my videos, I use my hand to deflect the fan. Since again there is a ceiling fan that is hot, don't touch it. Yeah. If I turned off the ceiling fan, I'd probably sweat to death in here. So, there's my glue gun's not turning on. I just used it too, just before I started filming this one. I just glued there we go, an accessory back together. Guess while we're waiting for that to heat up, since it didn't heat up initially, we plug this in. See if that motor actually turns. Yeah, she's turning. I'm gonna turn that off so I'm not blinded. Yeah. So we have quite a few videos coming out soon, hopefully. I don't know when this one will come out in the lineup. I send them off to the editor, and then he edits them whenever he can, and then sends them back so I can post them. He edits out the background sound, like the fan. He can't, unfortunately, edit out the clock you hear clicking, but I'm probably going to move the clock, because I've noticed when I watch some of the videos it's very prominent. Yes, I have two clocks in here that are analog. And one of them has a very loud mechanism, while the other one is whisper quiet. And I have one digital clock in here, but it's always at the wrong time, because we always lose power for some reason. They flickers. I'm not counting my watch or a cell phone, so like analog. I have a lot of clocks, but I'm going to relocate the noisy one here soon, so there's going to be a few videos still coming out that you're going to hear the click every second. Doesn't bother me because I like analog clocks and most of them make the noise, but if they bother you, sorry. I didn't realize the camera could pick it up since the clock is 10 feet away. So. But the clock that's making a noise, if you watch some of the older videos, is the clock that I got from Michael's that I modified with a lot of LEDs, the Grim Reaper clock. It was in my hallway entrance for the front door, and I moved it into here thinking it'd be kind of cool to have the Grim Reaper watching, you know, what I'm doing with the lights and a neat little night light, because it has lights in it that are always on. But I've noticed it's a little on the loud side, so I'm just going to have to leave this room and migrate somewhere else. Alright, so I'm just going to put a small dollop in there, and I'm going to push it on like that. I'm just going to hold it for a second so it can cool down. Apparently it's not quite dry. It's tipping. Center it back up. There we go. Much, much better. Now it's time for reassembly. First thing I'm going to do is unplug it so I have freedom to move this stuff around. Try not to catch everything. There are notches in this plastic for the wires, so we need to make sure that the wires go into the notches so that way I can screw the screws in. Like that. And like that. Completely missed. There we go. And now comes the fun part of pushing this in, because one of these has a lot of slack, which is this guy, and one of them doesn't have the same amount as the other one. So I use some pliers to grab it. This one barely can come outside the house. It's as far as it comes. So it's right up against the edge. I'm gonna see if I can slide her in, and it flew right back out. So there we go. So if you have this piece, one of the two fiber optic bundles on the inside is going to give you a little bit of a challenge. I would recommend a long set of thin needle nose. If you really want to, you can put a very small dab of hot glue on the inside of the clear plastic. That'll actually add some bonding friction. And the hot glue doesn't have to be fully at temperature, just enough to create friction to help hold it in place. Limex does that, and those Disney houses I worked on, I've done a couple. I did City Hall and the theater, and I used those were hot glued in. I didn't use hot glue, that's how they came. And right there. Hot glue does get used on fiber optics quite often, mainly because fiber optics now are, I'm already screwing that. Fiber optics are acrylic now. This number 2 is slightly smaller than this number 2, but my real number 2 doesn't fit in the hole, so it jumps a little. But fiber optics used to be fiber glass. That's the reason they were called fiber optics. And now they're acrylic. They're still fiber optics. They still transfer light and do their thing, but it's not the old school. And the reason you want to use hot glue is because if you use a super glue, it will melt the acrylic. Or it can melt the acrylic. It doesn't mean it's going to melt the acrylic. Well, I can tell already it's much better because the house is changing colors. There we go. Ooh. Neat. So now the patriotic house is done. Let's make this a low light situation so we can get a better view. this light. And the camera will adjust. There you go. So you see how the transition's smoother? That's the angle. When they're parallel to each other, the transition is a little bit more abrupt. So with it being at a slight angle, I've noticed it on a lot of the pinwheels I used to work on when they had them in hot tubs. The ones that the casing was damaged, the transition was nicer than the ones that didn't, because when the casing was damaged, the color wheel, which on a hot tub is glass, not the acrylic or plastic like this, would be canted at an angle, which would allow the transition to be a cleaner transition. Most people don't notice it, but you can see how the lights are changing beautifully. And now I'm going to tip the house so you can see the face. So the white light illuminates the inside of the house. You see the fiber optics around the roof line and the fence changing. And then there is a single incandescent bulb underneath. I forgot what they call this type of banner. There is a specific name for it, and I do not remember what it's called. I'm going to turn on one of the lights, come back. This thing here. There is an incandescent light behind here as well. You can change that one to LED if you want, but it's going to flicker potentially because it's AC, and I wouldn't worry about it unless it burns out. I'm sure if it burns out, you'll have to take the back off to reach in to get it, because you can't reach up to get it from the bottom. So, but here we go. Avon Patriotic fiber optic lit house. This is the name on the box. Here we go. Nice and beautiful. And like I said, the only thing that's not on here is the flag that goes on the flagpole. It's in the box, so I didn't break it or lose it. Now, one more time with the lights off, so you can enjoy the wonderful color of this house. So if you have an Americana or patriotic theme thing and you find this, let's say on eBay or something, and it doesn't work, you can open it up. The light that's in here is readily accessible. It comes in incandescent and LED. It comes in 3, 5, 10, 12 watts. This one's a 5. How bright this is, I wouldn't go any higher than a 5. 3 would dim it down a little, but then you would also dim the fiber optics, which I think are the perfect brightness right now. You can get it in a warm white or cold white bulb. Cold white bulb will make the colors more brilliant and much brighter, whereas the warm white mutes the colors and gives it a warmer, softer feel. So it's a personal preference. I personally would probably go with the cold white, but for the fiber optics, but the problem is it might also, where it comes through the plastic house, it might make it look funny. So I'd probably buy one of each and try it and keep whichever one I think was personally the best. But the motor I used, I got from Amazon. If I can find where I got it, I'll put the link on there for the slightly shorter shaft. So the modification to the new style motor would be you have to drill out the cap to the next size up and then put a dab of hot glue on it to hold it, since the tolerance is a little looser due to the fact that, well, you're drilling it out and the drill takes material and it might take a little too much. Also, it won't fall off if you tip the house upside down. So, but it's not a bad looking house. If I did a full patriotic 4th of July scene, this would be something I'd be interested in using. It's got one fiber optic that's stuck sideways on the tree. There we go. So, it's not a bad looking house. I do not know how old it is, but because it's Avon, I'm going to assume this thing is probably 3 to 4 decades. But it's in good shape. She keeps it in the box, only pulls it out during the patriotic holidays. 4th of July, Memorial Day, Veterans Day, things of that nature. So this will now go back to its owner with a new motor ready for display. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, put them below. And other than that, thanks for watching, and until the next one.